नमस्कार। अफ्रीका राइजिंग के इस नए एपिसोड में उन करोड़ों भारतीयों का स्वागत है जो अफ्रीका के बारे में कुछ जानना चाहते हैं। दे शुड बी इंटरेस्टेड कि भी अफ्रीका कैसे आगे जा रहा है। मैं रिपीट कर दूं आपको कि बाय 2050 अफ्रीका इज़ गोइंग टू हैव ए पॉपुलेशन ऑफ 2.5 बिलियन। जो इंडिया की बस्ती आज है उससे कई ज़्यादा। आज इंडिया है 1.42 और 2050 में इंडिया में रीच अराउंड से 1.7 बिलियन। बट देन अफ्रीका एलोन इज गोइंग टू, अफ्रीका एज ए कॉन्टिनेंट ऑफ कोर्स, इज गोइंग टू रीच 2.50 बिलियन। दुनिया के पाँच चार आदमी में से एक आदमी अफ्रीकन होगा, ये आप देखिए। और इतनी सारी अपॉर्चुनिटी जो अफ्रीका देगा पूरे वर्ल्ड को, उसी पे एक मेजर वीडियो जो है आप देखेंगे इसमें। और ये वीडियो का छोटा सा हिस्सा आपको दिखा रहे हैं, और लंबा वीडियो देखने के लिए आप जाइए यूट्यूब पे और सर्च कीजिए, मिल जाएगा आपको। चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं, देखते हैं।
Welcome, everyone, to the Real News Network. My name is Maximilian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief here at The Real News, and it's so great to have you all with us. In the description of his blockbuster 2021 book, Born in Blackness, Africa, Africans, and the Making of the Modern World, 1471 to the Second World War, author Howard French lays out his project thusly, quote, "Traditional accounts of the making of the modern world afford a place of primacy to European history. Some credit the 15th century age of discovery and the maritime connection it established between West and East. Others, the accidental unearthing of the, quote, New World. Still others point to the development of the scientific method or the spread of Judeo-Christian beliefs and so on ad infinitum. The history of Africa, by contrast, has long been relegated to the remote outskirts of our global story. What if, instead, we put Africa and Africans at the very center of our thinking about the origins of modernity?" End quote. Especially for people living in the West and in the global North, and especially for those of us living here in the heart of U.S. empire, the relegation of Africa and Africans to the outskirts of our collective imaginations is a constant that persists to this day. As someone employed in the news industry, I can tell you firsthand that this systematic deprioritization of stories from and about the vast continent of Africa and the 1.4 billion people who live there, who make up about 17% of the world's population, is a problem that is general and widespread. And the Real News is frankly not immune to this. Yes, we are a small independent outlet doing the best we can to cover news from the front lines of struggle around the globe. But we do not provide nearly enough consistent coverage of such stories happening in and across Africa. As the editor-in-chief of The Real News, I can assure you we are working hard to correct this. But there's a larger question to reflect on here. Why? Why is it so hard to get people to pay attention to this vast, diverse, important swath of the world? And as the 21st century stage for a new era of global competition for economic, political, and military influence in Africa from the likes of the United States, China, Russia, India, Turkey, and more, and as Africa itself becomes one of the critical sites of resource extraction in the fossil fuel and green energy wars, and as Africans themselves bear a disproportionate amount of the disastrous effects of the climate emergency, will that perpetual relegation of Africa to the status of second-class concern change? And if so, will it change for the better? To talk about all of this and more, I'm honored to be joined on the Real News Network by the great Nii Akuetteh. A Pan-Africanist originally born in Ghana and now based in the United States, Akuetteh is a policy analyst and activist and the founder of the Democracy and Conflict Research Institute based in Accra, Ghana. And he is the former executive director of Africa Action and editor at TransAfrica. Nii, thank you so much for joining us today on the Real News Network.
Max, the honor is all mine. Thanks for having me back.
As I said, it is no secret that in the world of English language media, especially here in the global north, news about Africa and Africans always takes kind of a back seat to news from other parts of the world. So I guess I wanted to ask you, with all of your wealth of experience, why do you think that is, and how is our understanding of the world that we inhabit distorted by this perpetual manufactured blindness?
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful question. It's a great question. It's the right question to ask because um, another way of putting it, I might say, is the coverage of Africa by U.S. media, but also by the media of the developed world, the Western world, is so flawed. And I think the first place I would like to start is to point out that it is self-defeating. It imposes a cost on those countries. But you are right. We should start at why does it happen? And I've been agonizing over this, Max. I have to tell you, it's almost I almost every day, at least every week, when I wake up and I look at how bad the coverage of Africa is, it hits me between the eyes. And so the question is why? And I've been reflecting on this for a while. I think that there is more than one reason. But the first reason I choose to highlight, the one that I think we have to really focus on, even if we might not be able to understand it, I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It is white supremacy. We live in a world. I mean, I think, recently we've had the G7 in Japan. For a long time, I've thought if you want to understand what's wrong with the world, look at the picture of the G7. It does not reflect the diversity of the globe we live on, because these are people who wield power. Now they meet over economics, but they wield a lot of political power in the UN, and they sure wield the vast power in terms of arms and security. They run the world. And that picture, if you want to put it that way, is a white supremacist picture. There are very few people of color in that picture. So I think that's one reason. And particularly in the United States, it is also very jarring because this is a country with close to 40 million people of African descent. So why they wouldn't cover Africa properly is a mystery, but I think it's because they are so focused on things that are white and Western. That's one reason. A second reason is that they are not highly informed about what's going on in Africa. They don't get it that what happens in Africa affects the United States, affects the rest of the world. We are at the beginning. I mean, I think summer will be starting soon. We are going to get a lot of hurricanes through the Atlantic that come slamming into Florida and up here through DC, Baltimore, all the way into Canada. They are shaped and determined by the Sahara Desert in Africa. It is in U.S. interest to be watching that and matching it. But when the major American news media cover the weather, they'll call it the world weather. They don't even look at Africa. They don't look at West Africa. Even that's where those weather patterns are born.